You know, if you've ever strolled through Paris, you've probably walked through Les Marais. It's that district, right? The one with the winding medieval streets, the grand old mansions, the hidden courtyards. It just feels so impossibly charming, like a little pocket of history that's been perfectly preserved. But have you ever stopped to think about how it was saved, and, maybe more importantly, what the real cost was?
Okay, let's just dive right in. The architecture here is just wow. This image really captures that classic style you see all over the neighborhood. These timber-framed buildings and narrow little lanes, it feels like you're in a totally different world from the rest of Paris with its huge, wide boulevards. It's like you've literally stepped back in time a few hundred years.
So that really is the big question we're tackling in this explainer. Why does this one neighborhood look and feel so completely different? Well, the answer isn't just that it got lucky. It's this whole story of decline, a really radical legal experiment, and a bunch of unintended consequences that, honestly, people are still dealing with today.
To really get Le Marais, you first have to understand what it survived. Because back in the 19th century, Paris went through one of the most massive, ambitious urban renewal projects in history.
Right, so under Napoleon III, this guy, Baron Haussmann, he pretty much took a bulldozer to medieval Paris to create the city we recognize today. You know, the wide, straight avenues, the uniform stone buildings, all of it. And while this was happening all around it, Le Marais was mostly just left alone.
But here's the thing. Being spared wasn't exactly a good thing at the time. This timeline really shows you what happened. After its heyday in the 17th century, Le Marais went into this long, slow decline. The rich families moved out, and their incredible mansions got chopped up into little workshops and apartments. By the time World War II was over, it was basically considered a slum. It was unsanitary, overcrowded, and a top candidate for demolition.
So the neighborhood was literally on the chopping block, about to be lost forever. But right when the bulldozers were warming up, this revolutionary new idea in city planning started to take off in France.
People started thinking, wait a minute, instead of just tearing down the old to make way for the new, what if we could protect an entire historic area? And not just a single building, but the whole thing, the streets, the squares, how the buildings relate to each other. For the time, this was a pretty wild idea.
And that idea was turned into law, the groundbreaking Marais Law of 1962. It was named after André Malraux, the Minister of Culture, and it was basically a direct pushback against that post-war obsession with modernizing everything. It gave the state the power to draw a line around a historic district and just say, nope, this, right here, we're saving it.
So Le Marais was the perfect candidate for this, but applying this law wasn't as simple as just passing it. It kicked off this incredibly detailed and super complex process to turn the idea of preservation into a reality on the ground.
Making one of these conservation areas was a lot of work. They had to create a super detailed preservation plan called a PSMV. And as you can see from these steps, this wasn't a quick fix. First, they had to draw the boundaries. Then they had to analyze literally every single building, draft these hyper-specific rules for everything from window frames to roof tiles, and then go through a whole public review process. Once that plan was approved, it overrode all other zoning laws. Period.
So Le Marais was designated in 1965, and it became one of the very first test cases for this new law. A huge, publicly funded restoration project started, and it saved all these incredible buildings from falling apart. But here's the twist. In solving one problem, demolition, the law accidentally created a whole new set of very modern conflicts. And this is where the story gets really interesting. This is the central tension. What happens when the goal of perfect historical preservation smashes head-on into the demands of the modern world? This quote from one of our sources just nails the issue perfectly. The very same rules and standards that are designed to make our lives safer and more efficient, well, they can become a huge threat to authenticity when you try to apply them to historic buildings. I mean, this picture just says it all, right? Imagine you're trying to preserve the beautiful, delicate interior of an 18th century palace, and then the law says you have to install a standardized bright green plastic emergency exit sign right in the middle of it. It's just a total clash, visually and philosophically.
And it's not just about how things look. This creates a real legal mess. For example, modern fire codes often say doors have to open outwards for safety, but pretty much all historic doors open inwards. Energy efficiency rules push for modern windows, which would mean tearing out original 17th century glass. And get this, European laws can even forbid you from using traditional materials if they aren't certified, so restorers have to use modern industrial stuff instead of what's historically accurate.
So you have all these legal and technical challenges, but that's only half the story. Because by perfectly preserving Le Marais and making it one of the most beautiful places in Paris, the law also unleashed some seriously powerful economic forces.
Let's talk numbers for a second. In 2023, a staggering 40% of luxury property purchases in Paris were made by international buyers. And where do you think they want to buy? Yep, in the most picturesque, central, historic districts. And all that demand, it sends prices absolutely skyrocketing. While the rest of the Paris region actually saw prices go down, these prime central neighborhoods just kept climbing. This kind of intense market pressure makes it almost impossible for ordinary people or local artisans or little family-run shops to stick around.
So, all of this leads to the ultimate question about what this incredible preservation effort has actually created. What has Le Marais become?
Well, it's like you've got two different versions of a neighborhood. On one side, you have a living neighborhood. You know, a diverse mix of people, local shops that people actually need, and real, authentic daily life. And on the other side, you have an open-air museum. It's perfectly preserved, sure, but it's also exclusive, gentrified, full of luxury brands, and mostly for tourists. The success of the preservation has pushed Le Marais firmly from that left column over into the right.
There's no doubt about it. The Malraux Law was a massive success at saving the physical buildings. The architecture was rescued from the wrecking ball. But the soul of the neighborhood, that's a lot more complicated. The very success of the project ended up displacing the original community, the artisans in their workshops, the small shopkeepers, the working-class families who lived there when it was still considered a slum. So the law saved the beautiful shell, but the question that hangs in the air is, for whom?
And that brings us right back to where we started. Le Marais is beautiful, it is historic, and it was saved by a visionary act of preservation. But it forces us to ask this really difficult question, one that cities all over the world are facing now. When we decide to freeze a neighborhood in time, what is the true price of that perfection?